Hi, it's Paul Clark here from YOUSRC on www.yousource.com. So here's another video around the examples that are on the website, and this example is going to talk to you about for loops. For loops are very important whenever you write apps because they're a way of quickly rerunning a piece of code whilst changing one of the variables that you're using in value. So maybe you've got in your game or app, you've got lots of baddies or something, and you want to run the same piece of code for each baddie. Then you would use a for loop. So let's take a look at for loop example, which is example 4. You'll see up in the thumbnail here that when it's run, it said hello world 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then there's a blank line. Then it said hello world 1, 3, 5. Then there's a blank line, and then it says hello world 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we'll run that in a minute, but with that in mind, let's have a look at the code. So the code's very simple. Just scroll it down to get the best view for you. There. So we've got just one function called start, and the code for that function is inside the curly brackets. And we've declared one local variable, which we've called n, which isn't very descriptive, I know, but it's a bit of a programming tradition again, that if you're going to have simple loops, then calling it something like n is fine. It's a much better idea, really, if you've got a certain game. For example, in that example I mentioned earlier, where you may have multiple baddies and you want to run the same chunk of code, then maybe you might call your variable baddie, so that it will remind you what it's doing. Okay, if we look through the code, we've got a for loop here, and then we've got a for loop here, and we've got a for loop here. And that's how we've ended up with these three chunks of hello world and then a number up in the thumbnail here. So let's take a look at the first one. So the first one says for n equals 1 to 6, open curly bracket, then we've got a gfx write hello world, and then a gfx write line n, and then a close curly bracket, and then a gfx new line. So what a for loop does is it reruns the code inside the curly brackets again and again and again, while changing the value that's declared up on the line here. So it's going to run that code where n has the value 1, and then it's going to run the code where it has a value 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, and then it will keep executing or keep running code after the end of the curly bracket. So n is the variable that's going to change. 1 to 6 says how it's going to change. It's going to start on 1, and then it's going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as it loops through the code within the curly brackets. So hopefully that's clear, and hopefully you can see that's why we get hello world 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up here. We're then going to have a new line, so that's another GFX library call that you haven't seen before in the example so far, but it just moves on to the next line, and that's how we end up with a blank line here. And then we've got another for loop. This is for n equals 1 to 6, step 2. So you can use the word step to show, don't just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Instead, add 2 each time. So it will go 1, then it will go 3, then it will go 5. And when it wants to then try and go 7, it sees that 7 is bigger than 6, so it doesn't try that, and it continues running code down here. Okay. So that's how we get hello world 1, 3 and 5 up here in the thumbnail. Then we have another GFX new line to give us a blank line, and as well as having step and a number like 2, you can also have minus numbers, so the for loop can run down. So here's an example of that. For n equals 6 to 1, step minus 1. And again, it runs the code inside the curly brackets. And that's how we've ended up with 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So hopefully this explains how you can have a local variable changed in a for loop with a step that you define. And if we now run that app, you should see exactly the same thing. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, gap, 1, 3, 5, gap, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I hope you enjoyed that tutorial about for loops.